Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Writer's Room. I'm here with Michael Long, a professor at Webster University in St. Louis, and he used to teach a class called Creeping Dread, Tales of the Uncanny, I believe, was the subheading? Yes?
The Uncanny in Fiction and Film.
The Uncanny in Fiction and Film. And so tell us a little bit about that class.
Well, it was designed to really explore one sort of theme in horror, which is what makes you feel uncanny. And we tried to define what that was, what that feeling was. We defined it maybe psychologically, philosophically, and then just through our experience of reading something or experiencing something. Occasionally I would start out the semester by doing a magic trick, because quite often when people see impossible things happening before their eyes, they feel uncanny. They feel, that makes them uncomfortable because they don't understand how it happens, how it works. So we would do that and then talk about that feeling. So it can arise from many things, but I tended to concentrate on stories that were more supernatural, ghost stories, things that go bump in the night and maybe you never really see what they are, but you see the effects of them. A good case in point from a classic film would be Val Lewton's Cat People from the 1940s. You see a cat occasionally, but you'd never really see that that's what's causing the things that seem to be happening. You see traces of it. You see cat footprints and bushes and things like that, but you really don't get a chance to see much. I mean, you do see a little of the cat, but not much of it at all. And the horror, the terror and horror are really created from shadows and the anticipation of something being out there, the dark. I mean, they used a lot of dark scenes, principally because that would help save them on settings. You don't have to light a whole room, so you don't have to have it all set perfectly. You can hide a lot with shadows in the room.
Yeah, I guess hiding the monster till the third reel or whatever is one of those like standard kind of things where you don't want to show things too early, right?
Right.
I think I can't remember the name of the movie, but about 10 years ago there was a movie about the Tooth Fairy who was coming and killing people in some little town. But before the beginning credits, they'd already shown the monster. And so when I'm watching, it's like, well, you already showed it. I mean, and now we get the opening credits, and I mean, you got it in the teaser, right?
Right.
I know what it looks like now. It's not that scary anymore. I guess in a way that in Jaws would help them a lot, but they didn't think was going to help them a lot, was that the shark didn't work.
Yes.
So then they had very, very few shark shots, and so that kept it off the screen, right? So you get the music that's telling you the shark is somewhere around, but you don't get to see it.
Yeah, or you see a fin, or the camera's looking for the shark and not finding it, and the water's dark, and all of that is.
And that's how they wanted to go originally, and yet that's more effective, really.
Yeah, because the terror takes place in your mind.
Right.
Again, like what we were talking about a little earlier on radio topic. Same thing in the radio play. You've made it happen in your mind, and that's much more frightening, I think, than when somebody shows you something.
Yeah, I think those are really the kind of horror movies that I like mostly. Where you don't see it, right? There's things going on. It's creepy. It might be scary. As I said in my episode with Anne on Event Horizon, to me, the first time I tried to watch Event Horizon, which I don't know if you have seen, I couldn't watch it all the way through. I actually stopped watching and finished it later, because it got to me. But the scene that got to me, there's nothing happening, right? It's just so tense.
Yeah.
And it's like, I know there's nothing really going on, but I know that there's something watching these people, right? And at some point, I just couldn't take that tension anymore, and I had to stop. And that can be so effective that you don't have to show anything if you built up that tension.
Yeah.
So what are some of the stories in film that you look at in the class?
Well, we read a short story by a woman named Rosemary Timperley. She was a British author from a while back, and she wrote a little tiny little short story called Christmas Meeting. And I first came across it in Roald Dahl's collection of ghost stories. Very short, but it usually sparks a lot of discussion. And the question is, who is the ghost in this story? Even that's up for grabs. and I think it's very effective and very short. And then we try to read a balance of stories by women, stories by men. Some are classic tales, like Poe's The Black Cat. One of the topics in something being uncanny is that there might be a doppelganger running around, a double. For some reason, we find that to be uncanny if we run into somebody who looks like us, or we see somebody who looks like our best friend, but they're not. So that's the Black Cat deals with doppelgangers quite a bit, double cats. And we also read, let's see, there's a story in French called The Venus of Ville, which is about a statue that gets uncovered accidentally, and it seemed to have been buried for some reason. And the reason it might have been buried is that it might be rather evil and coming to life after it reaches the ground again. So again, it always leaves, these stories usually leave something up in the air. You're never quite sure. Was it really a ghost? Was it really a statue coming to life? Or could it be explained another way? And that equivocation, that way that it can go either way, makes it, I think, unsettling and keeps it sort of unsettling. Then we watch films like, as I mentioned, The Black Cat. We watch a part of another Val Lewton film called Leopard Man, which does a very good job of building up suspense and horror without showing you a lot. We also watch the original The Haunting, which is based on Shirley Jackson's book, The Haunting of Hill House. And there, Val Lewton was an influence because the director, Robert Wise, was an editor, a film editor for Val Lewton, and learned a lot about how to tell a story without showing you a lot of things, but really building up the frightening, uncanny part of it. And if you've ever seen the original The Haunting, you'll realize there's a lot of consequences of what might be out there. You see effects of what might be out there, but you rarely ever see anything itself that's there. A thing that they didn't do when they remade it. They tried to show you too much and everything in the remake, and it was a different film. It wasn't Robert Wise's version, obviously.
But the sets were beautiful.
Yeah, and the camera work and all the fancy CGI stuff they were doing at the time.
Okay, and then you look at some international stories as well.
Yes, quite often we will look at a Japanese film. We'll look at the original Grudge movie, which again brings in some of the cultural aspects of horror. How do you create horror in a different context, where the language and the customs and the beliefs are different? So we'll watch those films and then talk about the culture, even if you don't know anything about Japanese culture. Let's say, what can you sort of infer from watching the film? What's making you feel uncomfortable? What do you think the filmmaker is trying to do to make the audience feel uncomfortable, if they're a Japanese audience, let's say, or a non-Western audience?
Yeah, I'd have to guess that they're much more fatalistic than us, because the movies are definitely very, once something evil notices you, I mean, you're just kind of screwed.
You can't seem to get rid of the ghost.
You didn't do anything wrong. You didn't like use a Ouija board or try to summon Satan or anything. You just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and something evil noticed you, and now that's it.
Yeah, and
you get to fight it off. It's just gonna get you.
We find something similar in Thai ghost stories as well. There's a very famous one about Mai Nak, a woman ghost. It's kind of a romantic love story too. It's a nice mixture of just a story that could be told as a romantic tale, but then it becomes a horrific ghost story too, and they're all sort of blended together. But there again, you don't really get rid of the ghost. You end up being able to control it, get it out of the way and control it. But it's always there, and if you do something wrong, it might come back again. you might release it, and you don't want to do that.
And actually, there's a temple to her.
Yes.
And so it's like she's dangerous, but praying to something dangerous might bring rewards, right? So it's a sort of liminal figure who can both give you perhaps what you want at the same time is a very dangerous thing to approach.
I guess it's the same feeling that people get when they go to any sort of temple, a temple of the gods, maybe in the Greek days. There would probably be an uncanny feeling that, I'm approaching the seat of power, and if I'm not careful, I might get struck by a lightning bolt or something if I don't make the right sacrifices or or what have you. But yeah, power can be useful, but also dangerous at the same time. Yeah.
So what else would you have talked about Japanese culture then? Do you guys have discussed?
Well, we talk a little bit about the idea of being clean with the household, the care of the household. And in The Grudge, if anybody has seen it, the original, the house that we start out in is very, very messy and very dirty. And we talk about how this is uncomfortable, I think, for people in Japanese culture to experience that. Also, notice the closeness of the rooms in their in the telling of that tale. It's sort of a built-in claustrophobia, but you can't really tell where you are sometimes in that house. You're turning a corner. Is there a wall there? Or is there another room there? But all within a small and confined space, and that I think is very Japanese too, because of the idea of space is so precious in Japan, and various other things that would come out from watching it.
Yeah, the neatness reminds me when we were in Hawaii. There was a Japanese soap opera on the local channel, and my mother watched a few episodes, and she was really kind of bored by the storytelling. But what she really wanted to watch it for was she was looking at all these like household things that just seemed so different.
Yeah.
Like when you're going to go to bed and you open up this closet, and you pull out this comforter and you throw it on the floor, and that's where you're sleeping. And in the morning, the first thing you do is like roll it back up and stick it back in the closet. So there's very little clutter. Things are not out. You use it and then you put it away. And she found that much more interesting than the story or the characters, actually.
Yeah, I would. I think that would be a good way to absorb the culture, just to kind of see how are they presenting things? How do they do their normal everyday routine that they're taking for granted, but we're not, because we're watching it through different eyes. Yeah.
So are there any other stories or films that you want to talk about?
Let's see. Sometimes in that class we end up watching Hitchcock's Psycho, or at least part of Psycho. And that's because it's sort of a threshold film. It sort of goes from the psychological into the more direct, in-your-face slasher-type film of certainly very shocking scenes. But even there, Hitchcock was clever because he didn't really show you what you thought you were seeing. He implied a lot with his editing and cutting. And also it's the buildup, it's the suspense. He was the master of suspense. So when you look at the film and the really horrific acts in it, they're not that many. They're maybe 2, 3 at most, and everything else is sort of building up to the next one or trying to figure out what you just saw. So it's a very interesting film to study from that point of view, and then to look at it sort of as a what came before Psycho and what came after Psycho.
Okay, so it's kind of one of those watershed kind of movies.
Yes, yeah, with a lot of things in it. And a lot of creepiness to it. I mean, just watch Janet Leigh driving away in her rented car, or the new car she bought, this used car, and the thing that's going through her mind, and the expressions on her face that change. I mean, that's almost pure creepiness as you watch that scene. And there's really nothing happening. She's just thinking these thoughts to herself.
Yeah, so there are other, I guess, genres of creepy movie, but maybe more in your face. So you've got a lot of, you mentioned the Saw movies previous to our interview here. And things like Hostel or Halloween or all those Jason movies where you're just kind of coating the screen with a lot of gore. I guess obviously some people like that because it seems to have an audience. We're getting a lot of body horror, with the human centipede kind of movies. I'm not really into that either, but we still have a lot of these creepy movies coming up. And I would kind of put the found footage movies in maybe that, because they're operating on the shoestring budgets clearly. So you generally don't get to see a whole lot in a found footage movie. Now, what some people don't like about them is that because it's a found footage movie, everyone's going to die. Your footage was found for a reason, right?
Right.
But on the other hand, you're probably not going to see a whole lot, and it depends on the actors and the director to make you creeped out, right? That there's something hunting you wherever you are in the woods, or something, you hear a noise, is it dangerous or whatever. So they are trying to kind of take advantage of we have no money, so how do we, effectively draw the audience in and convince you these characters are in mortal danger?
Yeah, yeah. Which is what Val Lewton was doing in the beginning at RKO. He didn't have a budget. He couldn't make King Kong. He had to make a film, and quite often they gave him the film title before he even had a script. So he had to make the film to fit the title. I Walked with a Zombie, Cat People, Curse of the Cat People.
That's something I complained about in one of my other episodes here, is the titles for all these horror movies are putting out now, even the creepy ones, are not memorable. I think when Ann and I looked at a movie called The Circle, I think there were 4 movies called The Circle. And so when I was telling the people who are watching this episode, you need to find The Circle that was released in this year with this cast,
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's 5 movies called The Dark. So they're really hard to differentiate, because it seems like putting a title on it is, I don't know, not important.
They just slap it on at the end. Well, maybe that became a benefit to Val Lewton. He had a title to begin with, and he had to shape his movie to the title. And they had tested the titles, so they knew the titles were good for audiences. So I guess that was something. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so if you were to give people watching this video, say, top 3 creeping dread kind of movies, go out and watch it for sure, what would you tell them they needed to see?
Ooh. Narrowing it down, yeah. Well, if you haven't seen the original Haunting, definitely see that. And then I would go back to some of those Val Lewton films, and Cat People, and maybe Leopard Man. Leopard Man is also kind of an underrated one. The commentary on my DVD copy is by William Friedkin, the director of The Exorcist, and he explains on that a commentary why it's so creepy to him. So I thought that was rather interesting, how he experienced it as a kid watching the film. And it's an unsettling film. Really, any of Val Lewton's films can be unsettling. There's one called Bedlam, several of them with Boris Karloff in them. Kind of, he wasn't just the Frankenstein's monster. He was, an actor who, The Body Snatchers. That's another one based on Robert Louis Stevenson's story. Almost any Val Lewton movie will have something there for you to see. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that we missed in talking about. Sometimes the old Alfred Hitchcock Presents shows, there were a couple of them which were actually ghost story related, although he said he never liked to do ghost stories. But he did have a few of those in his show. And Banquo's Chair, I think, is a good one if you want to look at just a short episode of a Hitchcock Presents.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining me for this episode of Writer's Room. I remember if you've enjoyed this episode, hit like and subscribe, and hit the bell notification button so you know when I upload more videos. Thanks for joining us. See you next time. Bye-bye.